The bustling marketplace of Zeta Prime Spaceport teemed with life from 1,000 worlds. Amid the cacophony of alien tongues and the pungent aromas of exotic cuisines, Richard moved with purpose, his towering frame cutting a path through the crowd. He paused at a stall, examining a piece of ancient technology. The vendor, a blue-skinned Andorian, eyed him nervously. "Finest quantum stabilizer this side of the galaxy, sir. Only 500 credits." Richard's lips twitched. The stabilizer was clearly a cheap knockoff, worth no more than 50 credits. "I'll pass," he said, his deep voice carrying a hint of amusement. As he turned away, a commotion erupted nearby. A young woman with bright silver hair rushed through the crowd. Desperation etched on her face. 3 men in dark uniforms pursued her, their hands hovering over holstered weapons. Richard's muscles tensed instinctively. He'd sworn to leave his old life behind, but old habits died hard. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. The woman stumbled, crashing into a fruit stand. Exotic berries scattered across the ground as she scrambled to her feet. One of the pursuers lunged, grabbing her arm. "No!" she cried, struggling against his grip. In that instant, Richard made his decision. He moved with preternatural speed, covering the distance in a heartbeat. His fist connected with the first attacker's jaw, sending him flying into a nearby wall. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The other 2 assailants turned, drawing their weapons. Richard didn't give them a chance to fire. He grabbed the nearest one by the throat, lifting him off his feet with ease. The man's eyes bulged as he gasped for air. "I suggest you reconsider your career choices," Richard growled, tossing him aside like a rag doll. The 3rd attacker fired his blaster. Richard moved faster than the eye could follow, dodging the energy bolt. In a blur of motion, he closed the distance and disarmed the man, crushing the weapon in his grip. "Last chance," Richard warned, his voice cold as space itself. The man took one look at his fallen comrades and fled, pushing his way through the stunned onlookers. Richard turned to the young woman, who stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear. Her emerald eyes were wide, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone softening. She nodded, then suddenly dropped to her knees before him. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I need your protection. I'll be your slave if that's what it takes. Just don't let them take me." Richard frowned, uncomfortable with her desperate offer. "Get up," he said gruffly. "I don't need a slave." The woman rose shakily to her feet, tears glistening in her eyes. Then what can I do? I have nowhere else to go." Richard sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. He'd spent years trying to live a quiet life, and now this. He knew he should walk away, but something in her pleading gaze stirred long-buried instincts. "What's your name?" he asked. "Enea," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "All right, Enea, I'm Richard. You can come with me for now, but as my assistant, not a slave." "Understood." Relief washed over her face. "Yes, thank you. I'll do whatever you need." As they made their way through the market, Richard's enhanced senses remained on high alert. He guided Enea with a gentle hand on her back, steering her towards the quieter residential district. "Who were those men?" he asked once they were clear of the crowds. Enea hesitated, glancing around nervously. "It's complicated. I'm not sure who I can trust." Richard's eyes narrowed. "If you want my help, you'll need to be honest with me." She bit her lip, then nodded. "You're right, but not here. Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Richard led her to a small apartment he kept as a safe house. As they entered, Enea's eyes widened at the sparse furnishings and state-of-the-art security system. "Sit," Richard said, gesturing to a worn couch. He remained standing, his imposing figure filling the room. "Now, tell me everything." Enea took a deep breath. "My real name is Enea Novari. I was the Princess of Neovia." Richard's eyebrows rose. He'd heard rumors of a coup on that distant world, but hadn't paid much attention to galactic politics in recent years. There was a rebellion, Anea continued, her voice cracking. My family, they're all dead. I barely escaped with my life. And the men chasing you, assassins sent to finish the job. She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I need help. I have to reclaim my throne, for my people's sake. Richard paced the small room, his mind racing. This was exactly the kind of complication he'd been avoiding for years. And yet, why me? He asked. You don't even know who I am. Aenea's gaze was unwavering. I saw what you did in the market. You're not just another mercenary, you're different, powerful. Richard's jaw clenched. She was more perceptive than he'd given her credit for. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and intense. If I help you, it won't be easy. You'll need to train, to become stronger. Are you prepared for that? Aenea nodded eagerly. I'll do whatever it takes. Richard studied her for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he made his decision. We start tomorrow, he said. For now, get some rest. You can use the bedroom. I'll take the couch. As Aenea retreated to the small bedroom, Richard stared out the window at the sprawling spaceport. He'd spent years running from his past, building a quiet life. Now, in the span of a few hours, everything had changed. He clenched his fist, feeling the power thrumming beneath his skin. It had been so long since he'd truly unleashed his abilities. The thought both exhilarated and terrified him. Whatever came next, Richard knew his life would never be the same. The next morning, Richard woke Aenea before dawn. She emerged from the bedroom, bleary-eyed and disheveled. Time to begin your training, he said, tossing her a set of plain, sturdy clothes. Get changed. We leave in 5 minutes. Aenea blinked in surprise but didn't argue. When she reappeared, Richard led her to a secluded area on the outskirts of the spaceport. The twin suns of Zeta Prime were just peeking over the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. First lesson, Richard said, his voice carrying the authority of a seasoned commander. Awareness. You need to be constantly alert to your surroundings. Without warning, he hurled a small stone at Aenea. She yelped as it struck her arm. Hey, she protested. What was that for? If that had been a blaster bolt, you'd be dead, Richard said bluntly. Again, this time, try to dodge. For the next hour, he put her through a grueling series of exercises, testing her reflexes and endurance. Aenea struggled but refused to give up, pushing herself to meet his demanding standards. As they took a brief water break, Aenea wiped sweat from her brow. How did you become so skilled? She asked, curiosity burning in her eyes. Richard's expression hardened. That's not important. Focus on your own training. But no buts, he cut her off. If you want to survive, you need to learn quickly. Your enemies won't wait for you to catch up. Aenea's jaw set stubbornly. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'll do whatever it takes to save my people. For a moment, Richard saw a flash of the royal she truly was. Despite her current circumstances, there was steel beneath her delicate exterior. Good, he nodded, because it's going to get much harder from here. Over the next few days, Richard pushed Aenea to her limits and beyond. He taught her basic combat techniques, how to use various weapons, and the importance of strategy. Through it all, Aenea's determination never wavered, even as her body ached and her hands blistered. One evening, as they shared a simple meal in the safe house, Aenea broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. Richard, she began hesitantly, I'm grateful for everything you're doing, but why? Why are you helping me? Richard was silent for a long moment, staring into his bowl of synthesized protein. Finally, he met her gaze. Because sometimes, doing the right thing is more important than staying hidden, he said quietly. Aenea's eyes widened. Hidden? What do you mean? Richard sighed, realizing he'd said more than he intended. Let's just say I have my own reasons for avoiding attention, but seeing you in trouble, it reminded me of who I used to be, who I should be. And who is that? Anea pressed gently. Richard's expression darkened. Someone who made a difference. Someone who fought for justice no matter the cost. Anea reached out, placing her hand on his arm. Richard tensed at the contact but didn't pull away. You're still that person, she said softly. I can see it in everything you do. For a brief moment, Richard allowed himself to feel the warmth of her touch, the sincerity in her eyes. But then he pulled back, walls slamming into place. We should rest, he said gruffly. Tomorrow, we start planning our journey to Neovia. As Anea retreated to the bedroom, Richard remained at the table, lost in thought. He couldn't deny the growing connection between them, but he knew the dangers of getting too close. His past was a weapon that could be used against him and against her. The next morning, Richard laid out a series of star charts on the table. Neovia is here, he said, pointing to a small system near the outer rim. It's not an easy journey. We'll need to avoid several checkpoints and navigate through some treacherous areas of space. Anea leaned in, studying the maps intently. What about this route? She asked, tracing a line with her finger. Richard raised an eyebrow, impressed by her quick grasp of astrogation. Possible, but risky. There's a lot of pirate activity in that sector. But it would save us time, Anea argued. And time is something we don't have much of. Richard nodded thoughtfully. You're right. It's a calculated risk, but it might be our best option. As they continued planning, Richard found himself growing more and more impressed with Aenea's strategic mind. She was no pampered princess. She had a keen intellect and a warrior spirit. We'll need a ship, Aenea said, breaking into his thoughts. Something fast and well-armed. Richard's lips quirked in a rare smile. I might have just the thing. Come on. He led her to a secure hangar on the outskirts of the spaceport. As the massive door slid open, Aenea gasped. Before them stood a sleek, silver spacecraft, its lines speaking of both speed and power. It was unlike anything Aenea had ever seen. What is it? She breathed, circling the ship in awe. The Shadow Blade, Richard said, a hint of pride in his voice. Custom built, with technology you won't find anywhere else in the galaxy. Aenea turned to him, her eyes shining with excitement and a touch of fear. This is really happening, isn't it? We're going to take back my world. Richard nodded solemnly. It won't be easy. The odds are stacked against us. But if you're ready, we'll face them together. Aenea squared her shoulders, standing tall despite her small stature. In that moment, Richard saw the queen she could become, brave, determined, and compassionate. I'm ready, she said firmly. As they boarded the Shadow Blade, Richard felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. It had been years since he'd embarked on a true mission, since he'd allowed himself to fully embrace his abilities. The ship's engines hummed to life, a sound of raw power contained. Richard's hands flew over the controls, preparing for launch. Last chance to back out, he said, glancing at Aenea in the co-pilot's seat. She met his gaze unflinchingly. Not a chance. My people need me, and I need you. Richard felt a warmth in his chest that he quickly suppressed. He couldn't afford distractions, not with the challenges that lay ahead. Then let's go save your kingdom, he said, engaging the launch sequence. The Shadow Blade rose silently into the air, then shot forward with breathtaking speed. As they broke atmosphere and entered the vast expanse of space, Richard allowed himself a moment of reflection. He'd spent years hiding from his past, from his true nature. Now, for better or worse, he was stepping back into the light. The legend was awakening, and the galaxy would never be the same. With a determined set to his jaw, Richard plotted their course to Neovia. Whatever dangers lay ahead, he would face them head-on. For Aenea, for justice, and for the man he used to be, the man he was becoming once again. The stars streaked by as the Shadow Blade entered hyperspace, carrying its passengers towards destiny. The Shadow Blade glided through the inky void of space, its sleek form barely visible against the backdrop of stars. In the cockpit, Richard's eyes flicked between the navigational displays and the vast expanse beyond. His enhanced senses, dormant for so long, now thrummed with renewed energy. Beside him, Enea sat rigid in the co-pilot's seat, her emerald eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "How long until we reach the Pyxis Nebula?" she asked, breaking the companionable silence. Richard's lips tightened. "Another 6 hours. It's the most dangerous part of our journey, a haven for pirates and outlaws." Enea nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We'll make it through. We have to." As if summoned by her words, the ship's proximity alarm blared to life. Richard's hands flew over the controls, bringing up a tactical display. "Incoming vessels," he growled. "3? No, 4 of them. Definitely not friendly." Enea leaned forward, studying the screen. "Pirates? Looks like it. Hang on." Richard's fingers danced across the helm, sending the Shadow Blade into a series of evasive maneuvers. The ship responded instantly, twisting and rolling with impossible grace. The comm system crackled to life, a gravelly voice filling the cockpit. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Dax of the Blood Reavers. Power down and prepare to be boarded or we'll blast you to atoms." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Not today," he muttered, engaging the ship's advanced cloaking system. The Shadow Blade shimmered and vanished from sight, leaving the pirate vessels firing blindly into empty space. Richard piloted with preternatural skill, weaving between energy blasts and debris. Enea gripped her seat, knuckles white. "That was incredible," she breathed as they left the frustrated pirates behind. Richard allowed himself a small smile, just a taste of what this ship can do. As they continued their journey, Richard found himself opening up to Enea. He shared stories of past adventures, carefully omitting details that might reveal too much about his true nature. In turn, she spoke of her life on Neovia, her voice tinged with both nostalgia and sorrow. Days passed, punctuated by moments of danger and quiet reflection. Richard found himself increasingly drawn to Enea's strength and compassion. He admired the way she faced each challenge with unwavering resolve, never losing sight of her ultimate goal. One evening, as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley, Enea broached a subject that had been weighing on her mind. "Richard," she began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you. About Neovia and my past." He set down his utensil, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening." Enea took a deep breath. "Before the coup, I had allies, people I thought I could trust. But when the time came, they betrayed me, sided with the usurpers." Her voice cracked with pain. "I don't know who I can trust anymore." Richard's expression softened. He reached across the table, briefly touching her hand. "You can trust me, Enea. I give you my word." She met his gaze, a small smile playing at her lips. "I know. That's why I'm telling you this. We need to be prepared for anything when we reach Neovia." As if on cue, the ship's sensors blared another warning. Richard sprinted to the cockpit, Enea close behind. "What is it?" she asked, breathless. Richard's face was grim as he studied the readouts. "A blockade. Looks like your enemies were expecting us." A massive warship loomed before them, flanked by a swarm of smaller vessels. The comm system crackled to life once more. "Attention! Unidentified vessel. This is Admiral Vex of the Neovian Defense Force. You are entering restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded." Enea's face paled. "Vex. He was my father's most trusted general. How could he—" "No time," Richard cut her off. "We need to act fast. Do you trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Then hold on tight." Richard's hands flew over the controls, pushing the Shadow Blade to its limits. The ship dove and rolled, weaving through a hail of energy blasts. Alarms blared as shields strained against the onslaught. "We can't outrun them forever," Aeneas shouted over the chaos. Richard's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. "We don't have to. Watch this." He engaged a series of commands, and suddenly the Shadow Blade's energy signature changed. To the enemy sensors, they now appeared as a small Neovian patrol craft. "How did you—" Aenea began, but Richard silenced her with a look. He opened a channel to the lead warship. "This is Scout Vessel NV-372, requesting emergency docking. We have critical intelligence regarding rebel activity." There was a tense moment of silence before Admiral Vex's voice returned. "Proceed to Docking Bay 3, Nevada, 372. But be warned, any suspicious activity will be met with lethal force." As they approached the massive warship, Aenea turned to Richard. "What's the plan?" He grinned, a fierce expression that sent a shiver down her spine. "We're going to take control of that ship, and then we're going to use it to reach Neovia." Aenea's eyes widened. "Just the two of us? Against an entire crew?" Richard's voice was low and intense. "You haven't seen what I can really do yet, Princess. Are you ready to find out?" She swallowed hard, then nodded. "Let's do it." The Shadow Blade glided into the docking bay, settling gently onto the deck. As the airlock cycled, Richard turned to Aenea one last time. "Stay close to me," he said, "and no matter what happens, don't be afraid." The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the belly of the beast. A squad of armed guards waited, weapons trained on them. Admiral Vex stood at their center, his weathered face twisted in a sneer. "Well, well," he drawled, "if it isn't the lost princess herself. And who's your friend?" Richard's muscles coiled, ready to spring. "Someone you really shouldn't have angered." What happened next was a blur of motion and violence. Richard moved with inhuman speed, disarming the nearest guards before they could even react. Energy blasts filled the air, but none seemed to touch him. Aenea watched in awe as Richard tore through the enemy forces like a force of nature. His movements were fluid, almost beautiful in their deadly precision. This was no ordinary man. This was the legend she had heard whispered about in dark corners of the galaxy. Admiral Vex bellowed orders, calling for reinforcements, but it was too late. Within minutes, the docking bay was littered with unconscious bodies. Richard stood amidst the chaos, barely breathing hard. He turned to Aenea, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Are you all right?" She nodded, unable to find words. Richard strode to where Admiral Vex lay groaning on the deck. He hauled the man to his feet, his grip like iron. "Listen carefully," Richard growled. "You're going to order your crew to stand down. You're going to give us control of this ship. And then you're going to tell us everything you know about the situation on Neovia." Vex's eyes widened with fear. What are you?" Richard's voice was cold as space itself. "I'm the man who's going to help Princess Aenea reclaim her throne. And if you don't cooperate, I'm the last thing you'll ever see." Hours later, Richard and Aenea stood on the bridge of the commandeered warship. The vast expanse of Neovia filled the view screen, a world of swirling blue and green. "It's beautiful," Aenea whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never thought I'd see it again." Richard placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We're not done yet. The hardest part is still to come." She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. "I couldn't have made it this far without you, Richard. Whatever happens next, thank you." For a moment, Richard allowed himself to feel the warmth of her gaze. But then he stepped back, his face hardening into a mask of determination. "Save your thanks for when we've won," he said. "It's time to take back your kingdom." As they began their descent into Neovia's atmosphere, Richard's enhanced senses detected a massive energy buildup on the planet's surface. "Incoming!" he shouted, throwing the ship into a desperate evasive maneuver. A beam of searing energy lanced up from the ground, narrowly missing their vessel. Alarms blared as the shield strained against the aftermath. What was that? Inea gasped, clinging to her seat. Richard's face was grim. Looks like Zorak's been busy. That's technology way beyond Neovia's usual capabilities. More energy beams filled the sky, creating a deadly web of destruction. Richard's hands flew over the controls, guiding the massive warship with impossible precision. "We can't land like this," he growled. "We need to take out those weapon emplacements." Aenea's eyes lit up with an idea. "The Shadow Blade. It's still in the docking bay, with its speed and cloaking ability." Richard nodded, already moving towards the exit. "Good thinking. You stay here and coordinate with the crew. I'll take care of those guns." But Aenea began to protest, but Richard was already gone. Minutes later, the Shadow Blade streaked out of the warship's docking bay, immediately vanishing from sight. Richard pushed the ship to its limits, dodging energy beams and return fire from the ground. One by one, he targeted the massive weapon emplacements. The Shadow Blade's advanced weaponry made short work of the defenses, but each attack briefly revealed his position. As he circled back towards the warship, a lucky shot clipped the Shadow Blade's wing. Alarms blared as the ship spiraled towards the ground. "Richard!" Aenea's panicked voice came over the comm. "What's happening?" He gritted his teeth, fighting for control. "Might have to make a rough landing. Don't worry about me. Get that warship on the ground and secure a perimeter." The Shadow Blade plummeted through Neovia's atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris. Richard's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limit as he fought to guide the wounded ship to a survivable landing. With a bone-jarring impact, the Shadow Blade plowed into a dense forest. Richard was thrown from his seat, his world dissolving into darkness. When he regained consciousness, the first thing he noticed was the acrid smell of burning electronics. Pain lanced through his body as he pulled himself from the wreckage. Despite his injuries, Richard knew he couldn't stay put. Zorak's forces would be searching for him, and he needed to rendezvous with Aenea. As if summoned by his thoughts, he heard the distant whine of approaching vehicles. Richard melted into the shadows of the forest, his training taking over. A squad of heavily armed troops soon arrived at the crash site. Their leader, a scarred man with cybernetic implants, surveyed the scene with a cruel smile. "Spread out," he ordered. "Find the pilot. Lord Zorak wants him alive." Richard watched from his hiding spot, assessing the situation. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Their movements were too precise, their weapons too advanced. As the troops began to fan out, Richard made his move. He struck with lightning speed, disarming the nearest soldier and using him as a human shield. The others turned, weapons raised, but hesitated to fire on their comrade. Richard used that moment of uncertainty to his advantage, closing the distance in a blur of motion. What followed was a display of martial prowess unlike anything Neovia had ever seen. Richard moved with inhuman speed and strength, his every strike calculated for maximum effect. Bodies fell like dominoes, unable to match his skill and power. The squad leader, realizing the tide had turned, raised his wrist to his mouth. "Lord Zorak," he gasped. "The intruder. He's not human. He's—" The man's words were cut short as Richard's fist connected with his jaw, sending him crumpling to the forest floor. Standing amidst the unconscious forms of his enemies, Richard allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He could feel his body already healing, knitting together the wounds from the crash. A distant explosion drew his attention. On the horizon, he could see the massive form of the warship, now grounded near the capital city. Flashes of weapons fire lit up the sky around it. Richard's jaw set with determination. Aenea was out there fighting for her people, and he had made a promise to see this through. With a final glance at the destruction he had wrought, Richard melted back into the forest. The legend had truly awakened, and Neovia would never be the same. As he made his way towards the city, a single thought drove him forward. Zorak would pay for what he had done. and Richard would be the one to deliver that justice, no matter the cost. The battle for Neovia had begun, and the galaxy held its breath to see what would emerge from the chaos. The dense forests of Neovia gave way to rolling hills as Richard approached the outskirts of the capital city. Smoke billowed from several districts, evidence of the ongoing battle between Aenea's loyalists and Zorak's forces. The distant thunder of energy weapons punctuated the air, a grim reminder of the stakes at hand. Richard paused atop a ridge, his enhanced vision scanning the urban sprawl before him. The massive form of the commandeered warship loomed over the city's eastern quarter, surrounded by a swarm of smaller craft engaged in aerial combat. His jaw clenched as he spotted a cluster of civilians fleeing from a group of Zorak's troops. Without hesitation, Richard sprinted down the hillside, his superhuman speed carrying him towards the conflict in a blur of motion. He reached the scene just as the soldiers cornered the terrified citizens in a dead-end alley. "Please," a woman cried, shielding her child. "We've done nothing wrong." The lead soldier raised his weapon, a cruel smile twisting his features. "Lord Zorak doesn't tolerate sympathizers. Make your peace with—" His words cut off in a strangled gasp as Richard materialized behind him. One powerful arm locked around the man's throat. The other soldiers whirled, weapons raised, but found themselves facing an empty alley. Their comrade lay unconscious at their feet. "What the—" one began, before an invisible force sent him crashing into the wall. The remaining troops fired blindly, energy bolts scorching the alley walls. Richard moved with preternatural grace, dodging each shot with ease. In a matter of seconds, the entire squad lay incapacitated. The woman's eyes widened in recognition. You're him, aren't you? The one they're calling the Shadow?" Richard's expression remained neutral. "I'm just here to help. Now go. Quickly." As the grateful citizens hurried away, Richard tapped the communicator he'd salvaged from the Shadow Blade's wreckage. "Aenea, do you copy?" Static crackled for a moment before her voice came through, strained but determined. "Richard, thank the stars. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. What's the situation?" "We've secured a foothold in the eastern quarter, but Zorak's forces have us pinned down. He's using some kind of advanced battle droids, nothing we've seen before." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Sounds like Black Star tech. I'm on my way to you now. Hold the line." "Be careful," Aenea's voice softened. We need you." As Richard made his way through the war-torn streets, he encountered pockets of resistance fighters. Word of his exploits had spread quickly, and many greeted him with a mixture of awe and hope. He organized them into strike teams, targeting key strategic points throughout the city. Hours passed in a blur of combat and calculated strikes. Richard's legendary abilities were on full display as he single-handedly disabled enemy weapon emplacements and rallied demoralized troops. Stories of his feats spread like wildfire, igniting the spirits of those who had long suffered under Zorak's oppressive rule. As night fell, Richard finally reached the eastern quarter. He found Aenea coordinating the defense from a makeshift command center, her regal bearing a stark contrast to the chaos around her. When she saw him, her face lit up with relief and something deeper. "Richard," she breathed, stepping towards him. "I was beginning to worry." He allowed himself a small smile. "It'll take more than a few battle droids to keep me away." Aenea's expression grew serious. "We've received intelligence on Zorak's location. He's holed up in the Planetary Defense Center, coordinating the counterattack from there." Richard nodded grimly. "Then that's where we need to strike. Cut off the head, and the body will fall." "My thoughts exactly," Aenea agreed. "But it won't be easy. The center is heavily fortified, and Zorak has surrounded himself with his most elite guards." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Richard replied. He turned to address the assembled resistance leaders. "Here's the plan." As dawn broke over Neovia's capital, the final assault began. Richard led a strike team towards the heart of the city, while Enea coordinated a series of diversionary attacks to draw away Zorak's forces. The streets echoed with the sounds of battle as loyalists clashed with the usurper's troops. Richard's team fought their way through waves of enemy soldiers and battle droids, his superhuman abilities clearing a path through seemingly insurmountable odds. As they neared the planetary defense center, a massive explosion rocked the ground. "Enea!" Richard barked into his communicator. "Report!" Her voice came through, thick with smoke but triumphant. "We've breached their outer defenses. The path to Zorak is clear, but you need to hurry. He's trying to activate some kind of doomsday device." Richard's eyes hardened. "Understood. Be careful out there." "You too," she replied softly. "Come back to me." With a final surge of strength, Richard and his team fought their way into the imposing structure of the Planetary Defense Center. They battled through corridors filled with automated defenses and fanatical guards, each step bringing them closer to their target. Finally, they reached the central control room. The massive doors were sealed shut, impervious to their weapons. "Stand back," Richard ordered. He approached the doors, muscles tensing as he summoned every ounce of his legendary strength. With a roar of effort, Richard gripped the edges of the doors and began to pull. Metal groaned and buckled under the impossible force. Slowly, inexorably, the doors began to part. As the gap widened, a hail of energy bolts erupted from within. Richard's team took cover, returning fire as best they could. Through the chaos, Richard caught a glimpse of a tall, imposing figure standing before a massive control panel, Zorak himself. With a final heave, Richard tore the doors from their frame, hurling them aside like paper. He strode into the control room, energy bolts dissipating harmlessly against his aura of power. Zorak turned, his cybernetically enhanced face twisting in a sneer. "So, the Shadow reveals himself at last. I must admit I expected someone more impressive." Richard's voice was cold as space itself. "Surrender, Zorak. It's over." The tyrant laughed, a harsh metallic sound. "Oh, I think not. You see, I still have one last trick up my sleeve." He pressed a series of buttons on the control panel, and a low hum filled the air. The floor began to shift and separate, revealing a massive device bristling with alien technology. "Behold," Zorak crowed, "the fruits of my alliance with the Black Star. With this, I can reshape reality itself. Neovia, the entire sector, all will bow before me." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He lunged forward with blinding speed, but Zorak was ready. The tyrant's cybernetic enhancements allowed him to match Richard's movements, if only barely. They clashed in a furious exchange of blows, each impact shaking the very foundations of the building. As they fought, Zorak's device hummed louder, arcs of energy crackling around it. Richard realized he was running out of time. With a burst of strength, he broke through Zorak's guard, landing a devastating blow that sent the tyrant crashing into the control panel. Alarms blared as the device's energy output spiked dangerously. Zorak laughed maniacally, blood trickling from his mouth. "You're too late. Even if you kill me, the device will overload. This entire planet will be torn apart." Richard's mind raced, assessing options in microseconds. With grim determination, he made his choice. "You're right about one thing," he growled, advancing on Zorak. "This ends now." In a blur of motion, Richard lifted the massive device, muscles straining against its impossible weight. Zorak's eyes widened in disbelief as Richard began to rise into the air, carrying the doomsday weapon with him. "What are you doing?" Zorak screamed. "You'll kill us all." Richard's voice was steady, resolved. "No, just you." With a titanic effort, he hurled the device upward, smashing through the ceiling and into the sky above. As it reached the upper atmosphere, the unstable energies within it detonated in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rocked the entire planet, but when the dust settled, Neovia still stood. Richard landed heavily in the ruined control room, his body battered but unbroken. Zorak lay amid the debris, his cybernetic enhancements sparking and failing. "How?" he gasped. "What are you?" Richard stood over him, his voice tinged with centuries of weariness and power. "I am justice. I am vengeance. I am the shadow that haunts the nightmares of tyrants like you." With a final, decisive blow, Richard ended Zorak's reign of terror. In the days that followed, Neovia began the long process of rebuilding. Enea was restored to her rightful place on the throne, her wisdom and compassion guiding the planet towards a brighter future. As for Richard, he found himself at a crossroads. For so long, he had hidden from his true nature, from the responsibility that came with his power. But now, standing beside Enea as she addressed her people, he felt a sense of purpose he had long forgotten. "People of Neovia," Enea's voice rang out across the crowded square. "We have endured great hardships, but together we have triumphed. As we rebuild our world, we do so not just for ourselves, but for future generations." She turned, extending her hand to Richard. "And we do not stand alone. The man known as the Shadow has proven himself a true hero of Neovia. With his strength and your unwavering spirit, there is nothing we cannot accomplish." The crowd erupted in cheers as Richard stepped forward, taking Enea's hand in his own. For a moment, the weight of centuries seemed to lift from his shoulders. Later, in a quiet moment away from the celebrations, Enea turned to Richard, her eyes shining with emotion. "Stay," she said simply. "Rule with me. Neovia needs you. I need you." Richard hesitated, years of solitude warring with the feelings that had grown between them. "Enea, I'm not like other men. The power I possess, the life I've lived, it's a burden I wouldn't wish on anyone." She reached up, gently cupping his face in her hands. "It's not a burden when it's shared. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." In that moment, looking into her eyes, Richard made his decision. He leaned down, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness he had held back for so long. As they parted, both slightly breathless, Richard smiled, a true, unguarded smile that erased centuries from his face. Together, then. Months passed, and Neovia flourished under its new leadership. Richard and Enea were married in a ceremony that united not just two people, but an entire planet. Their union symbolized a new era of hope and prosperity for all. But even as Neovia celebrated its bright future, darkness lurked on the horizon. On a distant world shrouded in shadow, a figure watched the events unfold with cold calculation. "So," the figure mused, its voice carrying the weight of eons, "the prodigal son returns to the light. How predictable." A subordinate approached, bowing low. "What are your orders, Lord Erebus?" The ancient being's eyes glowed with malevolent purpose. "Patience. Richard may have forgotten the true nature of power, but I will remind him. The game is far from over." As the figure turned away, stars seemed to dim in its presence. The next move in a cosmic chess match had been made, and the fate of not just Neovia, but the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. On Neovia, blissfully unaware of the gathering storm, Richard stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. Enea joined him, intertwining her fingers with his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Richard gazed at the horizon, a mix of contentment and quiet resolve in his eyes. "The future," he replied, "and all the challenges it may bring." Enea squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Richard nodded, drawing her close. As the twin suns of Neovia set, casting the world in a warm glow, he allowed himself to hope. For the first time in centuries, the shadow had found a place to call home. But in the vast expanse of the galaxy, ancient forces stirred. The legend of Richard, the shadow of Neovia, had only just begun. Dear listener, thank you for joining us on this whirlwind adventure with Richard and Enea. I hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as I have enjoyed crafting it. Now, if you're wondering about the origins of Richard's formidable powers and his incredible abilities, fear not. I hear your questions echoing through the cosmos. The nature of Richard's strength, his near immortality, and his ability to fly might seem mysterious and perhaps even bewildering. To delve into the intricate details of Richard's origins, his extraordinary powers, and the ancient secrets of his past would require an entirely separate saga. Let's just say, for now, that his story is steeped in the rich tapestry of a forgotten civilization and the boundless wonders of advanced genetic engineering. But more on that later, I promise. For now, let's celebrate the triumphs of our heroes and the hope they've brought to the world of Neovia. The tale of Richard the Shadow has only just begun, and there are many more chapters waiting to be written. Thank you for listening and for allowing me to share this epic tale with you. Your support and enthusiasm mean more to me than Richard's ability to lift doomsday devices, and that's saying something. Stay tuned for more adventures, and remember, in the vast expanse of the galaxy, legends never truly end. Warm regards, Sci Fantasy.